I could also do that. Am I free to go do it? Cool. Catch you all on the flip side. Hello, everyone! I'm Leggy Starscream, and today I'm here to present my research on breaking RPGs and algorithmic analysis. So the first question you might be asking yourself when, you look at this title is simply, why? Why the heck is this anything that might be interesting? Why are you sitting here rambling off all of these numbers for an hour? There shouldn't be an echo. So I guess the answer is slight echo or no echo at all. Anyway, so I'm not going to mess with anything else. Regardless, what's the last thing you heard from me? So let's get back to the question of why. Because, I can pontificate about that, but the real answer is routing is super hard work. And being able to highlight what happens in the routing process is, one of the things that I really want to talk about in the RPG setting, because unlike routing levels of Mario, where a single level can be routed in incremental chunks, and you don't really need to worry about, the continuity from level to level outside of, do you have a mushroom, do you have a fire flower? For RPGs, all your decisions kind of snowball out of control as you go. Not to mention, you have all these extra powers and abilities, and sometimes party member choices that you can do. All of these choices, this entire space of grinding and figuring out the best way to optimize the amount of time it takes to get through the game is really interesting, and highlighting some of these algorithms and underlying choices that the people who have devised the routes for all these speedruns have made is super fascinating. Plus, looking at this allows us to generalize and extrapolate the things we see in these games so that we can apply them to other games, be they games that you've just encountered that are unoptimized, or new games that are coming out. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of the talk, I just want to go over some of the stuff that we're not doing in this particular presentation. I've only run, so many games, but I did ask... boy. Okay. I will... Anyway, are we back? Finger guns? Yay, we're back! Okay, so, I had a lot of really cool things, and I just wanted to shout out some of the things that I was looking at, but didn't go into the full depth that I will be... You will see how much depth I'm going into in a little bit here. But I just want to shout out, in Kingdom Hearts, you have things like how you stack the various abilities that Sora unlocks. Kingdom Hearts 1 also has a really interesting mechanic where your MP bar is basically the value of your magic attack stat. So there's some interesting routing choices around there. Plus there's so much other things going on with all the different games and all the different systems that the different Kingdom Hearts games introduce, that, I could do an entire one of these talks just on that alone. I didn't go into detail about, ways to do super efficient grinding, playing in the arcade in Persona 3 for days on end to grind up your stats, or the Final Fantasy VIII card shenanigans where you take a card, you turn it into magic, you junction it up, and you have this ridiculous loop that allows you to artificially inflate your steps. One of my favorite things to see are the shenanigans around, multi-hit attacks in the Mario RPGs. But unfortunately, this is probably already going to run over, so I didn't get into that. And then in FF9, the charge ability that Steiner gets came up, but as far as I can tell, it basically just breaks the turn economy by letting every single other one of your party members do a physical attack. So if you just go all in on a physical attack strat, you're just doing lots and lots of damage by breaking your turn economy. So that's it. I did that one. There's our first one. Woo! We did it! But to get into what we're actually getting into in this one, the first thing, and kind of the inspiration for this talk in general, is the Materia Keeper strats in Final Fantasy VII, as well as Octopath's Hired Help ability, because we'll get into that, but I'm an Octopath speedrunner. I'll be running it for Power Up with Pride next weekend. And Hired Help is just so much more busted than anything else you can do in that game that I really wanted to sit down and figure out why. There's also the FF6 glitchless run that uses Bum Rush and Blizzaga to great effect. And then FFL2 has the Murder Bot, which you take your robot party member and you make them into this super powerful entity. And yeah, that's kind of an efficient grind explanation, but heck it, I know it by heart and I wanted to get into the numbers. But going over things again, these are all considered glitchless explanations. I didn't get into glitches because, like, on the one hand, those are super neat. I definitely support glitches. I wouldn't be here otherwise. But looking at the non-glitched edge cases within the algorithms of these big, complicated games was really where I wanted to take this particular conversation. So, without further ado, Final Fantasy VII. You might have heard of it. It's a pretty famous game, overall. But for this, we're focusing on the any % glitchless speedrun. And in particular, we're focusing on beating up this guy. This is the Materia Keeper. The boss shows up about 3 hours into the run. And the important stats on this friendo are that they have 8,400 HP and about 280 magic defense. So what are we going to do to take this friend out? Well, we've got a party of 3. There are a couple of iterations of how you can do the setup, but this is the one that I found that I decided to explore. You have Cloud with the enemy skill materia with Big Guard and Death Sentence. Big Guard just gives you haste, protect, and shell, so that's a speed boost, a physical and magical defense boost. And Cloud also has the ability to cast Death Sentence, which inflicts Death Sentence or Doom. It's that classic Final Fantasy debuff where a time ticks down, and at the end of it, the targeted character just straight up dies. We have Tifa, who has the Transform materia, which allows her to cast Mini. Any character that's minied does exactly 1 damage with their physical attacks. But she also has the Power Soul equipped, which is a weapon that she can use where if she's in critical health, she does double damage. So if she's minied, it'll do 2 damage. And if she's inflicted by Death Sentence, note that Cloud can cast Death Sentence, she can do quad damage. And then finally, we have Red 13, who has a couple of particular pieces of equipment and some various forms of materia, but the big one here is Red 13 has the Poison spell equipped. The Poison materia, which allows Red 13 to cast Bio, which does little damage as a treat, and also inflicts poison. Poison is self-inflicted damage equal to 1/32 of your max HP. And for Materia Keeper, that is around 262 damage per tick. Yeah, if it procs, the strat is going to be fishing for that proc. And finally, there is the secret status effect in Final Fantasy VII called All Lucky Sevens, where any character with exactly 7777 HP will do 7777 damage with any attack they do, overriding any other damage calculation that they've got going on. And remember when I said poison was self-inflicted damage? So, if we can poison Materia Keeper, which, luckily, Materia Keeper does take, is not immune to poison, so we can. And we get it to quad 7 HP, it will one-shot itself. So, we need to do 623 other damage in order to get this off. 2 poison ticks. We'll do 524 of that damage, which means we have to do 99 damage from other sources. So, with Red 13, at level 14, with 18 magic attack from Gear and Materia, leaving with a... And the leveling is going to get some magic stat. We'll get into that. Stat growths in Final Fantasy VII are not deterministic. But we can assume 23 for now, meaning that this is a 41 magic attack, Red 13 overall. We have our baseline damage calculation for magic, which is 330 for Red 13 here. And then the bio damage takes that, multiplies it by the bio spell power, and 512 minus the enemy's magic defense, and then divides things off at the end to scale things down to an appropriate level by a constant. And we run the numbers, and so we get about 93 damage from this particular version of Red 13, which is great. That's less than 99, but we still have an issue, which is that's the max roll we can get on damage. In Final Fantasy VII, the damage range is about 94% of the damage, up to 100% of the actual damage. So here, Red 13's actually going to be doing between 87 and 93 damage with the initial hit from bio. But remember, that magic stat is not deterministic. So this is where I started to go down a rabbit hole. Because in FF7, at every level, each character's stats have a chance to increase, ranging from +0 to +3, depending on a curve that is hard-coded into the game for each character, for each individual stat they have, and how far their actual current stat is away from the actual value, meaning that if your character starts getting too little or too many, has too high or too low a stat at any given level, it'll start normalizing back to that average value. And so, luckily, the algorithm's there, it's on game FAQs, easy to find, and I wanted to see what the range of stats on Red 13 were, to see, like, how consistent the strategy was overall, because if we start getting too much magic on Red 13, then we'll be doing over 99 damage with the initial hit, and the whole thing will go, pear-shaped. So, ran a million simulations of Red 13 leveling up to level 14, because I'm that kind of nerd. And we can see that, in general, you can expect to have between a 24 and a 27. But overall, as you can see, we're very close to the exact damage value we want. In some cases, great, we can roll exactly the 99 we need. In other cases, it's a little, it's going to undershoot. Luckily, none of the simulations we saw just straight up overshoot, so that's one less issue to worry about. So, in order to fine-tune the amount of damage we do, we cast Mini on Tifa. Again, minied characters deal 1 damage. If we cast Death Sentence on Tifa, she starts to do 4 damage, and if we get lucky, if she gets hit into critical HP, she can do an extra double damage for 2 or 8, depending on whether or not she has the Death Sentence on her. So we need to do these 2 poison ticks plus 99 damage. In general, Bio will do almost enough from the initial hit, and then we cast Mini on Tifa to fine-tune the amount of damage we do based off that initial hit, in order to get Materia Keeper exactly to that magic quad 7 HP. So, that's a lot. But let's start getting into the next case. These are going to be a bit more generic than the previous one, which is very much focused on that one boss who has just over 8,000 HP and the ability to be poisoned. But here, in Octopath, hired help is busted. As you can see, here's a average swing from a maxed out hired help. So, obviously, hired help has a high resource cost. It costs you 30k, I believe the unit of currency in that game is leaves, in order to use the attack once. And so much of the shorter speedrun character categories are routed around how can I get enough money to do all of the uses of hired help that I need to do in order to win this game. So, out there in the wild, there is a beautiful document that is the most comprehensive information we have about Octopath and the underlying algorithms and data that go into all of the attacks. I can click this and, like... As you can see, there's just so much information in this particular spreadsheet, but there's also just a PDF compilation document that's about 100 pages long of data and algorithms. It's amazing. And this is Octopath's damage formula for any attack your characters want to do. That's a lot of numbers, so let's get into things. So the attack value is your character's attack stat, either physical or magical, plus whatever bonuses their weapon give them. The defense value is whatever your enemy's defense stat is, and that's just hard-coded in all enemies have a defense stat. That is set. That number is not quite known because there hasn't been a lot of data mining yet, but it is fixed. Then we have some of these numbers that are ability-specific. Defense ratio, all skills will ignore some percentage of armor, so that they'll do more damage even against high defense enemies. And this is just a specific number for a specific skill. You also have the invocation and ability ratios, which are just, again, hard-coded values for the skill, though the ability ratio depends on how many boost points you spend on the actual skill. Then you have things that are just some straight-up extra multipliers on top of things. Your crit multiplier. If you do a critical hit, you do an extra 25% damage. Bada bing, bada boom. Weakness. If the enemy is broken, if all of their shields are down, you do double damage. If you use an attack that they're weak to, you do 1.3 times damage. Otherwise, you just do normal damage. If you have a attack buff on yourself, or a defense debuff on the enemy, you do an extra 1.5 times damage. These stack. You have a level scaling, so as your character gains levels, there's going to be this multiplier that changes as you go. It's about at level 1, 0.56, it gets to about times 1 at level 50. And then at level 99, it's about 1.4, maybe 1.5. These numbers haven't quite been 100% nailed down. And then, of course, there is just a random multiplier that adds or subtracts up to 2% from the amount of damage you're doing. So really, these last ones are just extra bonus damage that we can tack onto a skill through buffs and luck. So if we look at hired help, at its maximum boost level, it has a defense ratio of 0.56, an invocation ratio of 180, an ability ratio of 115. Those are just the numbers it has. What's interesting about hired help, though, is that as you boost it, the ability ratio goes down, but that's because boosting primarily just increases the number of attacks you do, rather than just doing more and more raw damage. But here's the thing about hired help. Hired help does not use your character stats. If you use hired help veterans, they come out of the bag with an attack value of 180 and a level multiplier of 2.18. I think. The exact value on that 2.18 and where it factors in was a footnote in the spreadsheet, and it wasn't quite fully realized where that comes from, but it makes the numbers massage out nicely, so we're just gonna leave it in there, not really worry about it. But the nice thing about this is we don't have to worry about our character stats, which is why in a lot of the single-story Octopath runs, you'll see runners just sell off all their gear at the final boss fight and use that to spend money on hired help. Gear does not affect how good your hired help is, only the amount of money you have in your pocket. So, for this particular demonstration, we're going to be beating up this boy, Darius. He's a jerk. I don't like him. Enemy stats are a bit hard to come by, but he's got an HP of around 98,000, and one of the interesting things about the way that values are reported in Octopath is, when I was initially doing my research into this, I found that a lot of the defense values on, like, the wiki and stuff are doubled compared to the numbers that I've found. I did a whole day where I just sat down and I used hired help on a number of different enemies, trying to figure out, like, where the defense values were and how they plugged into the formula correctly. And I found that, like, most of the defense values out there on, like, the wiki and stuff are doubled compared to what I want to plug into the formula. So that's weird. And just goes to show how much isn't actually known about Octopath as a speed game, and about the underlying values and formulas that go into it. So, in the run, we have Armor Corrosive up on Darius, which lowers his armor value. We break him, so we get that sweet, sweet double damage, and we max out our boosted hired help damage. Meaning that we'll be swinging for the full 4 times using the formula we have. So if we plug our values in, you can see that we start by doing the 480, and then we subtract off the defense value mitigated by that defense ratio stat we talked about. And so we're swinging at a base value of 424.84 damage. Then we take in all of the extra multipliers that come from the ability. We're going to assume it doesn't crit. He's broken, so the weakness multiplier is doubled. Level scaling, we're pulling in that 2.18 we found from the veteran hired help, and because Darius has the physical armor debuff, we do an extra 1.5 damage there. And if we run those through the formula, we get about 5,700, which is a little lower than we expect from how much damage hired help does experimentally. In the run, you can normally bank on it doing between 6 and 7k. And again, if we assume crits, if we assume hired help is critting in this formula, we get 7189, which is too high. So there's this weird threshold here in the middle that we're not quite reaching. which is interesting. It does show that Octopath has a lot of stuff that we just don't know about. But again, we can look at things experimentally and see, yes, these hits are doing a lot of damage based off this formula. And it's within the ballpark of what we're going for. So let's compare this to Therion's HP Thief attack. Here's Therion at the end of a Therion single story run. I just pulled up the last speed run of Therion that I did and just took a screenshot of Therion's stats. And along the way of the route, we pick up a Viper Dagger, which adds a extra physical attack boost, meaning that we've got 474 attack that Therion would be swinging with. He's level 20, so that's about a 0.75 level multiplier. And HP Thief, based off our spreadsheets, has a defense ratio of 9.25, invocation ratio of 110, 11 Z's. And an ability ratio of 340. So if we plug the numbers in, we'll notice that the base attack value is about 382, and with all of the other multipliers factored into the formula, we get about 3,200 damage. Which, in fact, does check out. So, what do we have going on here? Well, Hired Help, if you do a maximally strong attack with it, does 4 hits for about 6k damage a pop. HP Thief hits for 2 hits around 3k. Ugh. One of these things is slightly more powerful than the other. So, the real answer here, and the conclusion that we can come to, is that Hired Help does incredible work in single-story runs. It offers set stats that are independent of the player's grinding and level, so we don't need to worry about grinding. We can just go and throw money at the problem. Hired Help ignores so much defense that even on especially tough enemies, it does mountains of damage, and really nothing else even comes close until you start factoring in the hidden job abilities that are used in the full game, all stories, and even the super boss runs. So yeah. Coming up next, we have Final Fantasy VI, which is our third case study here today. The run is any percent glitchless, and today we're going to be focusing on the World of Ruin strats for FF6. So the route here is we start off by getting Edgar and Setzer. We already have Celis. We have to do the whole scene with Sid and the raft, and it's beautiful and poignant. Then we have to get these two boys. Because you need to get Edgar in order to get Setzer, in order to get Airborne, in order to do anything. Then, we grind Celis up to level 42 so that she can learn how to cast Ice 3. After that, we pick up Mog, then Sabin, then Go-Go in order. And we go kick Kathy's butt. Yeah, because, what's an RPG without a little bit of a butt kicking? So, the grind has one trick going on here, which is that Celis is going to have the Zone Seek Esper equipped, which gives her +2 magic power per level, so she's going to end that grind on 106 magic power, Keep that number in the back of your head. We'll get back into that in a little bit. Additionally, in Final Fantasy VI, because you have so many characters who are joining and leaving the party at various points, if you pick up a character for the first time, they will join your party at the average of your current party's level, plus some bonus amount depending on the character. For instance, a Locke will join your party in the World of Balance for the very first time at your average party level plus 2. If a character has been in your party previously, they'll rejoin at the average party level, or whatever their previous level was if it was higher, as kind of like a way to help catch them up to where the party is currently at. So, after we grind Celis up, Mog will see that our party has an average level of 26, with 2 level 19 characters and Celis at level 42. So Mog will join at level 31, which is nice because Mog joining at level 31 means Sabin will rejoin the party at level 27, and Go-Go will also join at average level 27, or 29 in total because of their plus 2 level bonus. And we have a little bit of remaining prep. In going into the final boss rush, we put 2 earrings. I think it's 2 earrings on one of them, and an earring and a hero ring on the other. Either way, they have the same effect of giving a 1.5 multiplier to all magical damage they do. And then we give Sabin Bum Rush. Bum Rush is a 128 power magical attack. That is what Sabin's ultimate blitz that he can learn. It also completely ignores the enemy's M-Def, or magical defense. Ice 3, on the other hand, is 122 power that does actually take the enemy's magical resistance into consideration. So, we've got the level 27 Sabin using Bum Rush versus Celis at level 42 casting Ice 3. And just like we've been doing, let's look at this versus the final boss. Kefka here has 135 magic defense, and so now we can get into the meat and potatoes, the actual damage formula. For spells, it is 4 times the spell power, plus your level times your magic power, times the spell power over 32. After you do that, you multiply that by 255 minus the enemy magic defense over 256. You can look at magic defense in this case as kind of the percentage of damage from the magic that the enemy will resist. A pair of earrings give that extra 50% damage, like I mentioned. And then there is, as always, the damage range values. So you'll be doing about 87.5 to 100% of whatever this damage calculation comes out to. So, Bum Rush. We plug in the numbers, and we get that it's going to do between 5,000 and 5,700 about. Ice 3 is going to do 25k before we factor in defense or the range. And when we factor in defense, that drags it down to about 12k. And then when we consider a low roll, it can do between 10 and 12k damage. So it gets capped at quad 9s. Because of how the old school damage formulas and displaying the appropriate amount of damage. So yeah, in this, Celis is guaranteed to hit that quad 9 damage cap. And Bum Rush is doing in the low 5,000s. So why am I bringing these things up? Well, Sabin's only level 27 with 32 magic power. Celis is level 42 with 106 magic power. Obviously, Celis, with all that grinding, is gonna do a little more damage. So is there, like, some way that we could balance out this comparison, see them a bit more on even ground? And of course there is. There's Go-Go, and we can use their stats, which are level 29 and 33 magic power. So the Bum Rush max roll from Go-Go is going to be about 6250. And then the Ice 3 max damage roll on Kefka is going to be 3050. So, putting it another way, if Celis could learn Bum Rush, and we'd only have to grind her up to level 27 with the Zone Seek Esper, of course, to ensure that she'd always be hitting that quad 9 threshold. So the takeaway we can take from this is, once again, the ability to cut through defense and ignore even just completely invalidated enemies' defensive stats can be very powerful, especially when those defense stats are forcing you to do a percentage of the amount of damage you would do normally. And also, focused, dedicated grinding is pretty okay. Being able to really hone in on Celis's magic attack to guarantee that she's going to hit those nice 100% guaranteed quad 9 Ice 3s is really useful. And speaking of being able to focus in on a single stat, let's get into our final case study, the Final Fantasy Legend 2. In this game, you get a party of 4 characters. You can choose any combination of the people on screen. That includes the fun little slime friend. But today, we're going to talk about the robot. And robots in FFL2 have their own special leveling mechanic. Humans tend to focus on a system that is akin to Final Fantasy II, where the more you do actions, the more you gain points in the stats that are relevant. Monsters eat meat drops from enemies that you kill in order to transform and mutate their way through a convoluted table in order to become new forms. But robots are really straightforward. Every piece of gear in the game, if you equip it to a robot, will give that robot some stats. HP for sure, but oftentimes, well, what are the other stats? Either strength, agility, or defense. And they can equip just about dang near anything. Any combination of gear you want to duct tape to that robot, you can. Got 3 helmets? Cool, you can put those on your robot. There are limitations to this in that FFL2 does have a item use thing. Items can break and will as you attack with them, but robots interact with that in some interesting ways that aren't really relevant to what we're getting into here. So, I mentioned briefly the stats. We have strength. It affects the amount of damage you do from some weapon attacks. Neat. You have agility, which affects the amount of damage you do with some weapon attacks, your initiative, and also the amount of accuracy that your attacks have. Mana affects magic attack potency and also your magical defense. Robots do not interact with magic at all. And then there's defense, which just affects the amount of physical damage you take. But, like, let's face it, an HP stat is the best form of defense. So for our robot friend, we're really going to be focusing on that agility stat, because look at how many things it does. So the play is to stack agility boosting gear. And yeah, that's about it. We go around and destroy things with weapons that do damage based off of your agility stat. So to give an example, for the Venus fight, which is a boss that happens midway through the game, she's notoriously difficult because she has a Aegis up, which only certain weapons can actually pierce through. But our robot friend is strapped with 2 laser swords, a rapier, a whip, a saber, and 2 headbutt attacks. Those coupled with our robot friend's 5 initial agility, which I definitely knew about when I started doing these calculations and didn't just realize was there less than a week ago, comes out to 69 agility in total. For the final segment, for the final boss, for Arsenal, you have a Cat Claw, the Karate attack. You have the Samurai Bow, and you just get 4 laser guns. Plus your initial 5 agility brings this robot up to 189 agility in total. Accuracy, it's your hit percentage is 97 minus the difference between the defender's agility and your attacker's agility, down to a minimum of 0. The max accuracy you could ever get is 97%, which means you'll always have that 3% chance to miss. And since our enemy stats are always going to be lower than our robot's accuracy, we're always 97% chance to hit. This can be unfortunate when that 3% hits. Then we have our damage, which in Final Fantasy Legend 2, damage is the weapon's damage, which is a formula often some constant value based off the weapon times a particular stat. Here we're focusing on agility. Then you add another random value that goes from 0 up to whatever that stat was. In this case, it's going to be agility. And then we subtract off the defender's defense times 5. And for our enemies that we're looking at, Arsenal's got 99 defense, Apollo's got 99 defense, Venus is 52 defense. And for our primary attacking weapons, for Venus, we'll be swinging with a laser sword, which does 11 times agility damage. And for everything else here, we're going to be attacking with a Cat Claw, which is 13 times agility damage. So, that's a typo. Yeah, so versus Venus, that's going to be 11 times... Let me pull up a calculator to actually fix the slide that I definitely finished. It's going to be 11 times 69 is... that... 99 times 5... Wait, no, it's 52 times 5 here. Oh my gosh. 52 times 5 equals 260. 11 times 69 and then We subtract those. To get our final damage range of 499 through 568. And with Arsenal, we do 13 times 189 plus the random value minus 99 times 5, which does 1926 to 2151. But Arsenal takes half damage from everything, so it's going to come out to be 981 through 1075, which does in fact line up nicely with the amount of damage you do see on Arsenal fights in the speedrun, which is super great. Here's Venus. I had my slides backwards. And as you can see, the damage value lines up with my on-the-fly calculation, but something's kind of funny, because the experimental results you get on Venus are in the 700 to 800 damage range, so I'm not sure if her defense stat is just wrong, or if there's some interaction between the laser sword and her Aegis shield. More research is required at this time to figure this out, but I just wanted to bring it up because it's always important to look at these sorts of... Oh wait, you know what it is? It's the agility magi. That's probably what factors in there. There's always things you have to remember when it comes into this game. So, in conclusion, we have a couple of takeaways from this initial survey of damage algorithms, which the first one is that ignoring defense is good. If you can have an attack that swings and doesn't have to deal with the bulk of the enemy's defenses, or even can ignore some of those defenses, that's going to do a lot more damage than things that run against the defense. Secondly, you want to go all in on one stat when you can. Being able to focus on one stat that does all the things you need it to do is really good. You can see this with grinding up Celis. We can see this with the Murderbot's agility stat. And finally, look for mechanical edge cases. Beep boop. Look for things that use different formula than the standard one that a game considers. Look for things that override your formula, such as the quad 7 hit on Materia Keeper. And these can lead to some really interesting tactics if you can find things that are programmed separately from the norm, and have interactions that might not have been anticipated. Thank you, and I will be taking questions at this time.